Hello, hello, DM Geezer Jim here. We are continuing our reading through the Uncaged Faces of Sigil, our second audiobook attempt here on my channel. About a third of the way through, some really interesting characters. If you're jumping in because of the name Judge Gabberslug, you're like, what the heck's this? Welcome to the series. I encourage you to check everything else out. If you've been along for the ride the whole time, welcome back, and thank you so much for your time. Our next NPC is going to be a view of a slight view of the justice system within the city of Sigil through the lens of through an interesting lens. Judge Gabberslug is an interesting non-player character. Hopefully your players never come across him, but more the theories, the themes that are discussed within within his write-up can add a lot of flavor to your campaigns. So let's get into reading it. We're going to try a couple different voices here. We'll see. So Judge Gabberslug. I'd cooled my wings in the city's court's holding pen since Antepeak 2 nights before, just waiting to hear my name so as I could go before the judge, pony up my fine, and get back to peeling the clueless outside old chirpers. When I thought of the easy jink I was missing while locked up, I got sick, I tell you. But then my mouthpiece came, stuck a ribbon scroll in my pocket, and said I'd been Gabberslugged. I thought that meant they had nothing on me, but two bashers took me down to the lower ward to that abandoned house folks call the Court of Woe and pushed me in. I tell you, I ain't peeling no one in this town ever again. The account of Negus Ham, a pickpocket from the Flames of Justice by Gina Ely. Most sods tried at the city courts meet justice behind bars or at the end of a noose. Of course, some grow foot-long beards just waiting days, weeks, or even months for their trial. The city court's a busy place, and sometimes the fraternity of orders judges can't keep the wheels of justice turning as quickly as they'd like, especially when the Harmonium patrols step up their arrest quotas. In times of extreme overcrowding, harried governors try to thin their dockets by quietly sending petty criminals to another venue for trial, the Court of Woe, a dustman tribunal in the lower ward presided over by the now Feshni called Gabberslug. Squatting in Ragpicker's Square, just a few minutes' walk from the mortuary, the Court of Woe seems a stately place with white marble steps, pillars, and archways to rival that of the city court itself. Chant on the street says the structure's made not of marble, but of the bones ground from Burks who have been tried there. That's just the talk of bubbers. Still, the mercy killers hate the place, sneering that it's a perversion of justice and they'd gladly clean it out, if only they could get inside first. See, the Court of Woe's an empty shell with nothing inside its walls but a polished tile floor. Only dustmen or Burks named in a special writ of transfer from the governors at the city court see anything different. Carrying such a document through the archway at the top of the stairs activates a portal whisking the accused and any co-defendants or character witnesses named within the writ to the real Court of Woe, a fortress in the negative energy plane. Dustmen make the trips just by being faction members. Mind a body wouldn't necessarily know he's been shunted to the Great Void. After all, he's still indoors. Of course, indoors now means smack in the middle of a mammoth hall built of the calcified husks of all manner of beings. Thousands of withered faces leer silently from walls, ceiling, and floor. 99 rows of splintery oak benches run the length of the hall, and crowds of dustmen mill about among skeletons, ghasts, white, and other undead. The faction's dead truce with the monsters ensure that they won't attack the living or vice versa. Some factioneers usher other dustmen or undead to their seats. Some stand ready as bailiffs. Some act as evidence handlers or witness callers. There are even artists that can capture the accused terror in ash and glue, and scribes that etch the account of proceedings into their skin or onto the unraveling wrappings of a mummy. Lights provided by will-o-wisps and crystal globes that hang from the ceiling. They glow more brightly when feeding on the panic of the accused. But a fiercer light issues from the front of the hall, the spot towards which all benches face, where the assembled bones of a Draco-Lich burn without end. Spectators who are long-haired or cloth-wrapped had best not sit in the first 3 rows. And in the open flaming jaws sits his most odious Gabberslug, judge of the Court of Woe. How a Tunari came to preside over a dustman court is not known, but a scholar of the lower planes I met while researching another book put forth this tale. Gabberslug was a judge on the Mountain of Woe in the Abyss, where a host of Nalfeshni determine the fate of mortals who land on that unspeakable plane. Gabberslug, however, was something of a prankster, and he delighted in embarrassing the pompous Baelor generals by selecting only the weakest mortals for slavery in the Blood War raids. Eventually, the troublesome fiend was exiled from the abyss. He wandered the plains until finally building a floating fortress on the negative energy plane made of bodies whose life force he had drained. Before long, Factal Skull of the Dustmen, whose members also call that Black Sea home, struck a deal with the Fiend. The faction would use the Macabre Hall as a court to try offenders, with Gabberslug as judge. Skull also offered limited use of the court to the governors of Sigil, promising that justice would be dispensed with a dustman's passionless precision, save that there would be no death penalty, as each being's progression towards death must be a natural one. It was an offer the governors could not refuse. This is a historical excerpt from the Flames of Justice. Gabberslug lives every bit up to or down to his wretched name. He's 20 feet of bloated, smelly fiend looking for all the multiverse like a swollen boar. Sprouting from the middle of his back are two pathetic hawk-like wings that flap spastically when he's excited, though they don't lift his bulk so much as an inch off of the ground. It's hard to tell what will get him excited. Most of the time he slumps in the skeletal jaws of his throne, plucking abyssal slugs from a bag of holding and popping them into his mouth, or picking at the scabs of his great hairy belly, or raising a husk in the floor from the dead, just so he can watch it scream. From time to time he livens up the proceedings with a thunderous belch. The normally slow dustmen step quickly to avoid passing through the billowing cloud of fetid gas. Of course, when Assad is brought in before his judgment, the fiend perks up a bit. His thick, fleshy eyebrows writhe like snakes over his crimson red eyes, which seem like they can pierce a Burke's heart and suck out his life force. And they can. Like all Nalfeshni, Gabberslug loves to feed on negative emotions, drawing fear, hatred, and despair out of mortals brought to the court for trial. What's left is just an empty shell. If Gabberslug stops before he drains the Burke dry, the accursed wanders in a daze for weeks afterwards, unable to sleep, fight, or even think properly until his mind returns to normal. Sometimes, though, Gabberslug gets carried away and absorbs the Burke's whole force. The resultant dead husk is then pressed into the walls or floor, becoming a permanent part of the court. Factal Skull always reprimands the fiend for his mistake and threatens to close down the court. Then Nalfeshni's fear of losing his easy meals is usually enough to prevent further accidents, for a while at least. Not every sod brought to the court gets drained, though. Fact is, that's the worst punishment, usually reserved only for those who deserve it, or those who annoy Gabberslug the most. It also curtails outbursts from observers in the court who risk being drained themselves. Not that dustmen are undead or given to the fits of passion. Normally, the fiends imposes lighter sentences, compelling offenders to perform some useful service for the dustmen. For instance, Assad might have to put in a few weeks' worth marking stiffs in the mortuary, hauling in debtors from every ward in the cage, or even cleaning the will-o-wisp spheres right here in the court. Whatever the service, the Burke's got to perform it to the satisfaction of a named dustman high up. Otherwise, he's brought back to the court for a draining Nalfeshni style, and is no use for a body in the court to struggle. The portal won't take him back to Sigil until the judge has passed sentence. That's the gate key, and the court has no other exit. Of course, a basher might consider escaping to the deadly wastelands outside the court, the negative energy plane, but it's not much of a refuge. And with a blood like Lord Porpin, Death Knight, standing guard in the court, not even a prime's likely to make a run for it. Lord Porpin is a Death Knight from the prime material world of Kryn, a former knight of Salamnia who was cursed by the deity Hidequil for seeing that his rival, an innocent man, hung in the king's court. After haunting his homeworld for years as a repulsive monster, Porpin chanced upon a portal to Sigil and took it. In the cage, he was just another Burke, a bit more skeletal than the average prime, perhaps. He jumped at Factal Skull's invitation to join the Court of Woe, and today he remains fiercely loyal to Gabberslug, using his short sword of life stealing against those who threaten the judge or the court. After all, Gabberslug is from the Abyss, said to be home of Hidequil, and the judge has promised to one day help Porpin gain revenge on the power. Danik, the pale cutter with the sash, got up and paced back and forth in front of the fiend, real slow, putting my case over, saying how it couldn't have been me what lifted the spellbook from that old mage. She never even stopped talking. It was just one long, bone-dry sentence that went on for hours. Never raised her voice, never lifted a finger. I tell you, the skeleton sitting in the audience had more going for him. But then that Sodenberg turned on her heel and started arguing against me, just as calm as you'd please, saying it was sure as Sigil was me, that folks had fingered me as the thief 10 times over, that the judge ought to make an example out of me. She won, all right, or maybe she lost. In any case, I sure lost. Another excerpt out of Negus Ham from the pickpocket at the start of the story from Flames of Justice. Wrinkled Danik, the current pleader of the court, has the task of arguing for both the innocence and guilt of each sod brought before the judge. As a dustman, the old woman's able to set aside all passion and put forth the facts of a case in black and white. Of course, sometimes it's unnerving for the accused to watch his lawyer do her best to get him off and see him punished. Interesting twist. Still, Wrinkled Danik does an admirable job, though a difficult one. It's hard to make a Tanari see logic. Often Danik argues till she's pink in the face, and Gabberslug just passes whatever judgment he fancies at the moment. Naturally, there's no jury, just Gabberslug. After all, it's his court. When Danik's not arguing cases for sods sent by the governor, she's trying to resolve contested faction contracts. Often, a Burg who enters into such a contract, giving the dustman rights to his future corpse in exchange for a few coins, tries to back out. Such matters go to the Court of Woe. A visit to the court is enough to make a Burg have second thoughts about renegotiating their word. The dustman Kaida is currently trying to drag a wood elf named Verdun into court. Verdun signed a contract long ago, so long ago, in fact, that the faction's sure she's using magical means to extend her life, and that's something the dustmen don't appreciate. Believe it or not, a few scrag knights of the post hope that an overworked governor will hand them a writ to the Court of Woe. After all, these knights that know whatever task Gabberslug names as punishment, it'll likely be better than facing the mercy killer's idea of justice. Even the fiendish draining, while terrifying, usually leaves a sod alive. But the governors aren't fools. They only give writs to those they think that'll benefit from the experience, or those they'd like to try to get rid of, like Sly Nye. A tiefling advocate, Nye regularly flummoxes Sigil's justice with his chaotic ways, and the governors occasionally let him accompany an accursed sod to the Court of Woe, probably hoping he won't return. Wrinkled Danik doesn't like turning over the reins of a case to Nye, but Gabberslug, who appreciates pure chaos, insists that Nye acts as pleader whenever he comes to the court. A few others in Sigil do their best to get to the Court of Woe. At last count, the somber Bleaknik musicians Morven and Phineas have gotten themselves arrested 36 times, hoping desperately to be Gabberslugged. The governors see right through them, and criers of commerce Harris Hatching can sometimes pull a few strings within the city court to get a friend, to see a friend gets a writ to the court. All right, that's our reading. Kind of lengthy. So, Gabberslug's pretty neat. He's a Nalfeshni, a demon, a greater demon. Infernal, Abyssal. Tanari is second edition speak for demon, for the record. Whenever you see Batizu, they're talking devil. Tanari is demon, just because they'll pop up as we go through the book, in case you weren't aware. So a greater demon who got kicked out of the abyss for being too chaotic. That's saying something. First and foremost, dude, you're so full of you're so confusing. Just go away. That should speak volumes about the weirdness that Gabberslug is. He is in ultimate power in this position. Period. The end. First and foremost, gameplay wise. Gabberslug is not going to be engaged by your players. They're not going to ever be able to make their way into the Court of Woe as antagonists in a state that they could even challenge a Death Knight and a Nalfeshi and all of the undead and. So first and foremost, unless you're super ambitious as a DM or your players are super ambitious, Gabberslug isn't a combat antagonist. But he is an antagonist. He serves as a judge, and very rarely is he going to judge you innocent. So what does this present? The story presents a picture of justice, a different form of justice within Sigil. Now the caveat is, although it looks really bad, it looks really spooky, you're walking into this nasty place that's made out of the husks of thousands of beings that have been drained and pressed into the columns and the walls, and you get to lean into the macabre when you're doing this. Filled to the brim with undead, presided over with the Death Knight as the bailiff. Not a good place. Not a good place. But when they go here, you get to be this weirdo, random, crazy, demonic judge who plays with the players And you can just be as random as you need to be, as silly as you want to be, as mean as you want to be. But ultimately, unless they truly deserve death, which they wouldn't be here to begin with, this is kind of one of the lighter sentences that comes along the way within a sigil campaign. Getting Gabberslug sounds nasty, and if you're capable of going through the process and not pissing them off, odds are you're going to get some sort of trivial, minor, mundane, or quest appropriate, adventure appropriate task working for the Dustmen. Now, the downside of that is it binds your players to playing within one of the factions at this point. So if you're trying to avoid the factions, Gabberslug probably won't really show up within your campaigns very much. Or you might be an interesting introduction to the factions. Look, these primes got in trouble being stupid. It was a fight, it's self-defense, but they broke a bunch of other stuff, and someone got hurt in their fireball. Send them to Gabberslug. They get sent to Gabberslug. They start learning about, well, what, the different factions, the different you have the Dustmen, the Mercy Killers, the Governors. Each of them represent a sense of lawful nature within the city. And so they're basically in charge of administering the courts. So it's a simple, quick, fun way to introduce your characters that get in legal trouble to the legal system without outright killing them or removing them from long-term gameplay with some crazy sentence down in Carceri, for example. Okay. More than that, this kind of represents more of a location than a non-player character. That's really it kind of wraps up in the sense that if your players need to go to court, this is an example of one of the courts where they have at least a chance of walking away and still being adventurers, still being able to go do their thing as player characters without facing too much of a long-term removal from campaign or possible death. But this is also a location, a situation where the Dungeon Master unequivocally is in absolute control of everything. You go ahead and drain them down to 10 hit points of their life, reduce their stats to everything, give them disadvantage until they finish a long rest with no savings throw, and you do that to the person that gets mouthy and the two people standing left and right of them, and then you smile as Gabberslug and say, that's just a taste. Do we want to do this, finish court or what? Or you don't. You have fun with it, man. He's a chaotic, evil judge. An oxymoron in existence. But anyway, so Gabberslug is an interesting non-player character. The location is very, very cool. But more than anything, as you listen to the story or if you read it for yourself, it's just a picture of the court system within the city. Sigil is a city. Your players are more likely than not over the course of adventuring, if they spend any time in Sigil, they're going to run afoul of the justice system. And Gabberslug gives you an option to manage that in a kinder, gentler, more enjoyable way rather than this horrifying court proceeding where everything's stacked against characters anyway. But that's it for this section. Cool guy. As I guess interesting now feshy guy. If you enjoy playing the chaotic people, you can have a lot of fun with him. If you struggle with him, don't bother sending him to Gabberslug's court. There's no need for it. But yeah, that's going to be it for today. That's going to be the last reading for now. We'll probably get back to our stuff and get to the Grixis on the next one. But hey, hopefully you're enjoying the series. Likes, follows, subscribes are appreciated. Join us on Twitch for live chat. Leave me a comment if you've enjoyed it. If you want to discuss any of these non-player characters, more than happy to get into a little bit more depth than what we can cover in a 10 or 20 minute video. But y'all be safe out there. Thanks for your time. See you soon. Dude, you're on my mouse. Come on, cat. Cat on the mouse.